So this is part 2, and where on earth am I going with all this stuff? And I'm going to take it to a completely different perspective, and I'm going to go back to this book about Russia, modern Russia. And this is what I've learnt. The society in that country is in a state of chaos, because what happened is the Russian people have been exposed to so much. They experienced a monarchy which was really an autocratic, despotic tyranny which went on for a very long time, and eventually it got replaced, as we know, in 1917 by communism. And communism was such a breakthrough, it felt like at the time, because this is all about the workers, the people that were the proletariat, the ones that were grafting away and being treated so badly. They needed to rise up and overthrow the tyranny. And as we know, what happened is one tyranny got replaced by another one. And we had, not very long later, we had Stalinism, which was an unbelievable regime of tyranny, where people were literally disappeared in their millions and never seen again. So what I have personally experienced, and what Ruslana experienced, she had the experience of being totally lost. And what happened to me when I finished that film is I really got in touch with the fear. The fear that I have is not what others can do to me, but the fear of what I can do and have done to others, getting into really angry states and just completely losing the plot, which I did with Cinder for those 6 months every weekend. Can you imagine how disturbing it is, the sense of shame that I carry from that? But I'm using all this to look at the bigger picture. And I was particularly moved by a book which I read about a young Korean woman who escaped North Korea, and just a tiny little bit about what life is like in North Korea. Basically, everyone is in a state of fear, and everyone loves the leader. And I do mean that. They love their leader. When you read what she writes about, it makes you understand how all this works. So what I've been speaking about, which can happen to individuals when they join the cult, or young lads in Greece who get rounded up to become torturers in due time, whatever it is, this happens on a much bigger scale. So it happens on the scale of an entire nation like North Korea. Everyone is frightened, and she talks about her childhood. She talks about the extreme poverty and lack of food very often. And she talks about the fact that when she goes out of her little hovel and walks down the streets of her little village, there are dead bodies everywhere. And that's just how it is. That's what she grows up with. So people are killed, and the country is in such a state of chaos, and there are so many dead bodies that they lie there for a long time. This gives you an idea of what's been going on in the history of the planet. So you've got a whole nation of people who are lost. Now when you expand this out to something bigger, when we think about the USSR or the Russian Federation, we're talking about not just one country, but many countries where all the people have been exposed to the same kind of brain washing, mind control process. Because with communism it's the same thing. The children become young pioneers and they're blindly obedient. And we think about the Hitler Youth in Nazi Germany, and they're all blindly obedient. They do all these horrific things. So what happened with Russia, when communism broke down, we then had the mafia, we had the gangs, and we had the oligarchs, and suddenly small numbers of people became very, very rich very, very quickly. And that's as much as I knew. But what I've discovered from reading the book is that the whole country is in such a state of chaos, because the fundamental roots of the human being have been severed, but on like a whole scale of many countries, all experiencing this. And so the people are behaving in ways which are just inconceivable in terms of the corruption, the brutality. I don't want to go into any details. If you read the book, you will see what it's like. And imagine a young man is eligible and compelled to undergo military service. It talks about what actually happens to these young boys who join the army in Russia, and many of them die because the brutality they experience is so extreme. So one thing that I understand about this kind of oppression, this kind of tyranny, is you have all these people and they're very frightened, but also they're carrying a huge amount of anger. And this is how all these things can be done. This is why the Greek torturers could do those things to those people, because they had been so brutalized and so mind controlled themselves into a state of blind obedience. So the common denominator with everything is a sense of being lost. And I'm going to give you a total contrast. A few years ago I was sitting in a room with maybe 60 people, and there are 4 people at the front, and they are people from indigenous societies, from Africa, Aboriginals from Australia, Native Americans, and they speak about what it is that they have, and it's extraordinary. And what I realised, we all realised, listening to these people, the Aboriginal speaking, the African speaking, there was something that they all had. None of them were lost. They were completely aware of their place within the family, because the family unit in indigenous societies is unbroken, it's strong, and there's a sense of extended family and community living within the village. And more than that, they have the sense of belonging to a tribe. And what this means is it means they are connected to their ancestors. So the big lesson that these people were sharing with us, both men and women standing on the stage, is that we are so blessed because we've got a connection to our ancestors and we know our place. And we are not lost, but we look at you in the West, and they would say the same thing about the people in Russia and China and North Korea. You've got vast parts of the world where everyone is lost. Everyone's been experienced to mind control, being subjected to a tyranny. And the common thread is the breakdown of the family unit. And this was done in Russia and China through what we call collectivization. You had collective farms and collective factory units. So let's go back to the cults. Why is it after one day of being in this cult, these people were so desperate to come on day 2? And I was like that when I did my training with Landmark. I was so hyped up for day 2. I really wanted to be there. I was so keen, and no way was I going to be late. I arrived in plenty of time. I left earlier than I needed to, so I could do my commute and be sure to be there on time. So this is a really big part of the experience, is what is it that they give people? Well, what they give you is they give you what I would call a false sense of community, because it's all been done through intimidation. But the sense of community you've got is the fact that you're with these people all being exposed to the same treatment, and you get back on day 2 and the first thing that happens is people say, well, did you manage to hug 10 people? Yeah, I did, it was really great, it was wonderful. So they start to get what I call this false sense of community, and this is the glue that binds them together. And the point that I realised from Ruslana's experience is that she felt lost, and the models that she was doing the course with, they all felt lost because they were just objects to be photographed, and no one wants to know anything about their thoughts, feelings or opinions. So this profound sense of lostness that paves the way for this kind of treatment. So this is what is going on a worldwide level, and we've got parts of the world, there are people who have never ever felt lost because they've always known their connection to their loved ones, to their family, to their extended family, to their community, to their tribe. They know where they belong, and that gives them such a sense of rootedness and groundedness. And such people are not amenable to any of the treatments I've described because they've got that connection. So the way that I see it is this: the human race is going through this extraordinary experience of, when we go back into the past, no matter how challenging life was historically, we had our sense of a home and our family and our connection to the ancestors, to those that gave us life, and appreciation for our life. And what's been happening globally is through various governments and regimes, this has been broken down, and this is why you keep seeing the destruction of the family being a big key to all this, because it really helps to take away this support network people have got. Then you can get to them, and it's putting us all into this position of choosing, of making a choice and learning to say no. So for me, the moment when I was in that Landmark, the third organisation I got involved with in this way, the big step was when I said no. And they heard my no, and they made their follow-up phone calls, and they made my no, and they left me alone. So that's been my breakthrough, that's my victory with all this. And also, it's happened in another way too, and this is a difficult thing to talk about, but I'm being told I need to add to the picture. So I did tell my experience of being in that cult with the eyes being around me and mindlessly scraping the paint off the door and all the rest of that. And the person did make the point, I see, so basically your wife took you out of there, and she wanted you for her own purposes, and that's true. So this is another thing. We talk about empaths and narcissists. We talk about the idea that there are people that are so focused on their own needs because of their own childhood wounding that they actually choose someone that's going to fulfill their needs. So with Cindy, it was very, very clear. When we met, it was as if someone said lights, camera, action, and I was cast in the role of lead male in her personal drama, which is I've got cancer, and it was a 25-year ride that I went on. And there was a particular point in that journey when I finally learnt my no, because let me make it clear in case you don't quite grasp it. If you're married and your partner's got cancer, then whatever needs you've got are always going to come second to her needs, because basically she's got this horrible life-threatening illness, and of course she's right, of course her needs are of paramount importance. And so that meant that in my life with her, I very quickly learned to obey, the blind obedience. But there was a moment that came about 1 year before she died, and it's extraordinary to realise that someone had such a severe illness actually loved to go out and socialise, and she loved to go to camps and festivals. And this was a big festival, this is called the Big Green Gathering, and she'd arranged for someone else to take her there. We'd been divorced for some years at this point, and she does want help. So basically when they arrive, someone comes and tells me, and I go to the car and I help her with all the things, get all the things out of the car and set her up in our encampment. So there's a yurt where I'm staying, and there's another yurt for that person, a yurt for that person, there's a yurt for her, and everything's set up for her. And I'm in the caravan, which is like the central point for this little encampment in the Big Green Gathering, and going through everything that she needs and got everything sorted out. Then she asked me for something else, and I turn and I look at her and I say no, and she's deeply shocked because she's not used to hearing that word being said from me. And so that was another, for me, pivotal moment in my life when suddenly I realised that yes, I will do all these things so that you can have this experience at this festival, and suddenly what you're asking me is too much, and I'm going to say no to this one. So that's part of the journey that we're all on, as I see it, is if you've been brought up in a communist country or a capitalist country, whatever kind of government you're exposed to, whatever situation you're exposed to, we all go through these experiences of feeling lost, and we go through these experiences of just wanting to comply, and then eventually we reach the point where we want to break out of all that, and we learn to say our no. And this is what I've learned: when you say our no to someone who's trying to coerce you into doing something, it's a wonderful moment. And that's like the journey of the human race, is to experience all this enslavement so that we can actually let go of all these things and say, this is my life, how am I going to live my life, what do I do starting today? And that's when the magic really starts to happen. So I've produced these sheets to explain the whole process. You begin with the breakdown of society, the tribe, the family, the ancestry, through the culture that we live in. That leaves people in a state of rootlessness. You're ungrounded, you have no roots. When you are rootless, you are a suitable candidate for any cult, any organisation to be able to take you and do what they will with you. So that then, as you're a suitable candidate, you then find yourself exposed to information. You then choose to do the training or whatever it is, and you're recruited. That's recruitment. You then get taken through a series of initiations. Now, the exact word I use for these initiations are called kilthotic initiations. These are basically a particular application of dark magic, and it's used to distort what is called the tree of life in Hebrew spirituality into something called the kilthotic tree of life. And I haven't got the space to be able to get into that in this film, but believe me, that will be covered at some point. So that's all these humiliations, all this coercion, all this control that you get during whatever training you're exposed to. Those initiations put you into the point of imprint vulnerability. Once you reach imprint vulnerability, they can do anything they like with you, and what they will derive towards is blind obedience, and you do everything that they say. So there's a bit that I've missed out. The imprint vulnerability is a state of such profound fear, because at that moment I'm totally lost. I don't know what up is, I don't know what down is, and so I just blindly trust the people. So that creates the obedience, the blind obedience. The blind obedience can be used to get the person to do anything. So when I read about the way young soldiers are treated in Russia today by the older soldiers, getting out their anger, and a lot of them dying, this is to do with what I call the monster factor, the zombie factor. That's these people acting out of blind obedience, doing these things that no person in their right mind would ever do. A person brought up in an indigenous society would never be able to beat a bunch of young lads to death. They couldn't do it. It's not possible, because they've got a sense of morality, because they're connected to their ancestry, to their families, to their tribe. So out of the zombie, we then get to the you do anything you're told, and then that leads to what I call hell on earth. So that's like the model that we are being exposed to here as a human race. Now, the antidote to all that is as follows, which is the indigenous society, where people have these profound connections, where they are grounded, where they're rooted. So it starts as follows. You are a member of a tribe, a family, an ancestry. This gives you a rooting. You are grounded. This means you are an unsuitable candidate for all forms of mind control. You cannot be recruited, because you have the power of no, and you have a strong sense of your identity as being part of a community where everyone looks after each other. This then leads to a feeling of empowerment, and in these indigenous societies they have initiations into manhood or womanhood, and this is for the good of all. And this is where the man goes off and does his vision quest, maybe when he was a teenager, and he goes off and spends a whole day on his own and a whole night on his own, and he goes into his own process. He's being helped through all the things that have been done with the tribe, and they often go through quite challenging, disturbing things. One of the things they can go through is where there's a whole load of the tribe, and they have to run through this corridor, and they will lash out them and beat them, and this is all part of the initiation. So I'm not saying that the initiations done in tribes are all cuddly and sweet. Some of the process they do are harsh, but the point is it's all done to actually foster the sense of connection. So what then happens is they go through this process, they have this time on their own, they've gone through whatever rough thing they go through, and then they're welcomed into the tribe as no longer a child but a man, no longer a girl as a woman. And then the man will become a warrior, and the woman will become one of the people that makes the community work in terms of all the things that keeps the tribal communities going. This is all talking about teamwork. Everyone's working as a team, because everyone is acting for the greater good, and there's a sense of protecting the young and protecting the vulnerable, which means that everyone is living in integrity, which means that you are living in what I would call heaven on earth. So that's heaven on earth, that's how it's created. Now there is a drive amongst people all over the world these days, and I see it at retreats. People come on a retreat and have the most incredible experience. They really love being there, and they do get exposed to being uncomfortable, And if it's a retreat where people are working with plant medicines, the kind of thing they get exposed to is a sense of collapse of the ego, and they can experience being lost too. And so you can imagine late last night there was this thought going on. I thought, okay, what about people who do shamanic trainings? What about people who do retreats? Isn't that just mind control as well? Isn't that dangerous? Isn't that dodgy? Well, this is where the integrity comes in, and it's where working with guides and helpers comes in, and that is so important, and that's what makes it safe, because actually we've got that connection. We've got that connection, which is so important, that we're doing everything for the greater good, and we're doing everything so that person can become more aware of themselves and more empowered, and that they can have an experience of community. This is perhaps the most important thing about any retreat you ever go on, is you have the opportunity, if people are not using mind control on you, but they're actually creating this place which is safe and protected, where you start to have your conversations with the people on the retreat, and you make friends for life at those things, because you're getting a taste of true community, even if it's only for a few days. And what I've detected in the 10 years of hosting retreats is an upswell of people who would really have this feeling that they want to live in community where everyone is actually working for the greater good, to support themselves and to support each other, to make the world a better place. So we are in this amazing journey, human race. It's very exciting, and if you've experienced loss, the great thing about experiencing loss is you know that place, or you know that's not a place you ever want to be. So for me, my liberation has been my training as a shaman in 2005 and 2006, and when I joined my community of shamanic brothers and sisters, I was training with my teacher who had integrity, who we all trusted, and with the guides and helpers that we were working with, that we learnt to trust, and the healings that we performed on each other, which helped each other to be better people and healed. That was wonderful. So that's been my journey of liberation, coming out the other side of all this stuff. So thank you very much for your patience in listening to this. Thank you.